Nandi County Senator joins us this morning, Senator SAMSON CHERARGEI. Yamune.
Missing?
See, we're learning slowly.
Yeah, you're learning.
We're still having conversations about the finance bill, Senator, and you've joined us for that. And I've called it a punctuation conversation because you were categorical in no full stop, no comma. This bill will not be touched. It is going as is. It was you.
Yep, it was me.
Let's just start with what made you say that.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me again. It's always wonderful to be here. But I'm not used to you sitting there, but it's good.
Sometimes things...
I'm used to Eric sitting there and you sitting to me. So it's always good to be here. I think this issue of finance bill, I saw you have been having a couple of guests. As a country where we are, it is not, we are not sitting pretty. I think late last year when the Kenya Kwanza took over and even ran up to the general election, everybody was concerned about the economy. What we are now is there are only two options, my sister and City, is that the country is on the cliff in terms of economy. There are two things that are available to the country. Either we continue to borrow more or we tax. Borrowing more is no longer tenable. You are aware, Parliament, and it is good to go on record that I voted twice when they were raising public debt ceiling. So you can see I've been consistent and you can check with the answer.
You were voting to make sure that the ceiling reaches maximum capacity?
No. I resisted the public debt ceiling on several occasions. And I remember we were 7 senators then, and you can check with the answer of the Senate. Because as we talk, the public debt is around 9 trillion. In fact, to just give a brief synopsis, this 9 trillion is under Article 202. The first charge to, under Article 202 of the Constitution, the first charge in payment is the public debt. The country is paying over 1 trillion in public debt. The president, in his projection of collecting tax, is 2.2 trillion Kenya shillings. The financial budget of 2023-2024 is 3.6 trillion. We are paying that of more than around 1.2 trillion Kenya shillings. We have a budget of 3.6 trillion Kenya shillings. We have a deficit budget on the table. Borrowing is no longer tenable because we will risk, and the president, you saw the president and you media are present in that interview at the State House, read by Eric Latif. And the president, you could hear that we don't want to risk this country going to other countries, I don't want to mention names, where you will carry around 5 kilos of banknotes to buy a loaf of bread. So the issue is that we must tax. And I want to tell Kenyans, there are no new taxes that are being introduced. These are just traditional taxation that has been. When you look at the finance bill, I know the main concern are two things. Housing levy fund, about 3%, which is not a tax. It is a saving and it is providing for mortgage housing program. And you know, under Article 43, it talks about social economic rights. And one of the rights is basics like food, shelter, and clothes. And housing is very important in terms of human rights compliance. Number two is on the issue of VAT on fuel, where it has been moved from 8% to 16%, where under the recommendation of IMF, we have been able to remove fuel subsidy. If you have been following Senate proceedings, I did raise through the Energy Committee a couple of weeks ago into investigating what happened to fuel subsidy. Because as we talk, Sports Fund gave 34 billion to payment of fuel subsidy. As we talk, the Minister of Energy, there is a line of people who provided fuel under subsidy in this country who are still being owed billions. It is not small money that went to fuel subsidy. Just the way Unga subsidy used to operate like happy hour. I don't drink, but I'm told when you go to a bar, there is always a happy hour. So you could find Unga being sold at certain supermarkets, and then it is finished. So it was no longer sustainable. And you are aware, when you talk about subsidy, it is important that when you subsidize at consumption level as opposed to production, it's not sustainable. So that is why I'm saying the way the finance bill is, it should be passed as it is, because one, those people at the bottom need resources to get good roads, to to get housing, to get drugs in hospital, to get bursary, to get subsidized fertilizers, among other, for production.
Sure.
So the point is, I've heard people saying you are overburdening the hustlers and the people at the bottom. But those people at the bottom, if we do not provide taxes as at now, is how will you provide services to them? Finally, on my point is that I've seen, and what the government and the president has committed is, and from where I've sat and we have had conversation with him, is to ensure we close on tax exemptions. It was ridiculous because I was in the previous parliament where exemptions were being given to some organizations in this country, and we know one of them, and I don't want to mention because it's a court matter, up to 300 million. Yet the law provides that you can only give tax exemption to disabled.
And you were in parliament when these things were being passed, but you sat, because this is the thing, and I think that's the conversation, Senator, among some of these things, is that a lot of complaints are being made today about things that happened when they were able-bodied, warm, blood-pumping individuals sitting in the National Assembly, and these things passed. These things happened. But then we take and are able to hold the reservation and complain about them today. But there were people in Parliament. 5 years ago, there were people in Parliament. 4 years ago, there were people in Parliament. 9 months ago, there were people in Parliament.
I agree with you, but what I'm saying, for example, I've used public debt ceiling. When that matter came to Senate, it's only 7 of us who voted against raising of public debt ceiling. But as they say, majority have their way and minority have their say. There are people who have opposed that exemption. But it was done, and that is why that matter is now going to court. I'm told the company might end up being fined up to more than 1 billion Kenya shillings. So I'm saying the reason I'm just building up the conversation is that now we don't need to give out tax exemptions that are not necessary because that company is not disabled. The law only recognizes the marginalized and disabled that could be. And then another issue is about tax reliefs. How do we ensure we don't? There was allegations I think came out this year that some of the goods from China they did not pay tax for 470 billion.
Okay.
So you can see, my sister, that close to 1 trillion Kenya shillings were being given either tax reliefs and tax exemptions. If we seal and ensure that there is a proper collection of taxation, CT, is we shall ensure that we maximize collection in terms of it. And therefore, when you look at finance bill, I don't think there is something that as a country we have an option for. It is. I know it's painful. I know there are Kenyans outside there that cannot afford 3 square meal. I know there are Kenyans out there that cannot pay the school fees. But we must be. This is the turbulent moment for economy in this country, and we must make a painful decision that the only option we have to do is not to borrow more. We maintain, as the president has brought to parliament, and when we were passing, we were looking at budget estimates and budget policy statement, is in comparison with GDP. So in my own opinion, I know under Article 118 you will ask what is the role of Kenyans in such process. Of course, the legislative process is there where Article 118 provides for public participation by parliament. We shall listen to Kenyans. Those opinions and views of Kenyans will inform the future decision. And I want to tell the country...
Will they really, Senator? I'm sorry, I have to interject here. Because you're saying that, and it seems like window dressing to me. It seems like it's, according to 118, we have to do it. So let's just do it. But you've been categorical stating that nothing about this bill is going to change. So it almost flies in the face of the rights of Kenyans that are constitutionally bound to be able to participate in decisions that are essentially being made on their behalf. So if you say nothing about this bill is going to change, public participation is taking place today, it's almost as though you're saying, well, yeah, you can participate, but nothing is going to change.
But what I can say at this point is that that is why you interjected me when I was finishing, that some of these views will inform our future decisions.
For this bill, it's not going to be...
For example, under the Finance Bill 2023, we can still amend at some point. The Parliament, of course, under Article 93, Parliament means Senate and the National Assembly. It means we can still amend this law because we have the power of lawmaking. We can either amend, repeal, or even create a new bill. And therefore, you know that where we are is the country is in a economic crisis, that we need to pass this bill to allow government to get resources to start implementing. Let me tell you and be categorical and be honest here. If we do not pass this finance bill as is, not ought to be, we will do nothing for the next financial year or even 4 years.
Okay.
And yet Kenyans will demand that Mombasa Road lower deck to be fixed.
What do you mean we will do nothing, Mheshimiwa? I mean, already we don't have that bill operationalized, and we're doing a great deal.
Which is?
Well, we are doing what we're doing. You people are making laws.
Yes.
We are talking about, essentially what we're doing more than anything else is we are talking. Okay?
Okay.
Yes.
Agreed.
Now, you are therefore saying that with the finance bill, beyond the talking, we are going to see some monumental changes. Walk us through this. What are these changes that we are likely to see?
Thank you, City. I know the country is moving, it look like, but are you aware county governments were almost shutting down? You are aware, and even you asked me, I think we have a discussion the last time I was here at Devolution. Are you aware there are no quorums in county assemblies? Because county assemblies are important in budget program. The financial year we are in is the financial year of the previous administration of former President Uhuru Kenyatta. This is the first financial year under William Ruto's government. Yeah. And therefore we had a manifesto, we had a plan. And this plan need to be financed.
It is true, but this plan took into account what it is that you are going to inherit. You cannot tell me that a political party went full throttle to seek political power and didn't understand what it is that they stood to inherit. You inherited a certain government, just like Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto inherited something. Everyone inherits.
Yes.
Now, here we are with what was inherited. And you're telling us that with the finance bill, you now want to right certain wrongs and you want to set us on a path of recovery. And I'm asking, what exactly do we anticipate to see?
Thank you, City. What I can say is that the reason I was making that comment is that the reason this finance bill and the budget has been drawn is in accordance with the plan and the manifesto. The easiest option for the president was to continue borrowing from both local and international lenders. The president has said, no, we must stop. And you remember when he was campaigning, you are the media, you covered him. And he said that the issue of public debt is not tenable. I remember when the interview, one of your colleagues were interviewing in that choir here. And the only way is that now we have the plan. The Kenya Kwanza has taken over government. This plan must be financed, but the option of borrowing is no longer tenable. And that is why we are turning in now and saying, Kenyans, can we kindly, with a lot of respect, come back and relook and try and collect revenue. I've given an example where tax exemptions and reliefs were being given unjustifiable and illegal without following the law.
Okay.
And I can tell you, I know you'll ask me, yes, we are paid tax, what follows? The president has committed that the issue of public wastage will be stopped. The issue of corruption, which is eating, I agree, because kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. When you pay tax, and I sat with somebody who has lived in the States for 20 years, and when this finance bill came, we sat down, and he told me, I don't have a problem paying tax. But I told him the reason you don't have a problem paying tax is because in US, your tax works for you. You get the public transport works, the roads are fixed, there is water, there is gas supplied to you, there is drugs in hospital, and therefore I told them, for you there you can pay. But now the only challenge to government, and the president insists on this, is that Kenyans, yes, will pay this tax, but this tax must work for Kenyans so that Kenyans are motivated. Because the three of us who are sitting here, if you pay tax and you see working, I don't think you'll have a problem on paying tax. So the issue is that this budget that is being drawn, and I've told you it's a deficit budget already. Even if we were to collect the highest that the KRA has projected is 2.2 trillion Kenya shillings, that is revenue. And the budget that Ndindi Nyoro-led committee is as proposed is 3.6 trillion. So we still have a lot of, and if you remember in the projection of this budget, the president ensured through line ministries that at least 400 billion was reduced, and he had promised that around 300 billion had been removed. So what I'm saying, that finance bill,
400 billion was reduced.
Yes.
Where?
There are some number, if we had gone with the way the proposals of ministries, what we call budget estimates, because what happened, the budget making process is that counties had proposed 425 billion. The CRA had proposed 447 billion. The Senate passed 385 billion. So the line ministries, I know where you are going. The line ministries, comes with proposal with estimates.
Yes.
So those estimates were being cut down in terms, especially on the issues of where they are spending on traveling allowances, among other capacity trainings and what have you. So most of them were cut down.
That's not a saving because it was never spent. That's not a saving. It was a suggestion of what they could have spent, but they said, okay, let's just not add it to the line.
But the president had said in the coming financial year he will try and cut down, looking at the revenue that we might end up collecting.
But it didn't work because clearly we still have a bigger budget than there was the last time.
But looking at the projections that had been provided by the finance people, if we had done, we would have been looking at 4.2 trillion budget.
Whereas laymen have a problem,
yes,
is we do simple arithmetic. If you tell us there's a reduction and yet the budget we have is more than the one we previously had, so we then ask,
we're still looking for the reduction.
Where's the reduction? Because reduction in our mind, the budget needs to go down. That one, clear, we understand reduction. The budget has gone down. And if it goes down, it means what you're saying is evidence in line items within various ministries, the expenses and the costs also going down. But we are talking reduction and yet our budget keeps going up. So I'm a bit confused.
But you have to appreciate that even if the issue we are talking about reduction is the ministry's estimates. The president went and directed some of the estimates were not necessary, or some of the projections that the ministry looking at the collections that we were doing. In fact, in comparison with the public debt that we are paying. So in as much as looking at the previous year, but if we had gone the way it was, we would have gone to 4.2 trillion Kenya shillings. And you remember some of this money was going even to some of the SCAC or state corporations and bailouts. You remember there are some the organizations or parastatals in this country where government has shares that we have to pay. Like in the last, I think December, I can't recall properly, is that around 34-point-something billion was given to KQ for bailout, for example, which that money is going directly to KQ or Kenya Airways, but there's no value for. There are many state corporations that are making losses, and that is why the president has proposed that some of those parastatals, I know there is a tussle whether parliament should be part of approval process. That's a conversation we can still have as a parliament. But some of those corporations are gobbling in money without value for Kenyans, and those are some of the things that the president is looking at to cut down. Because if we are giving 34 billion, for example, to KQ to bail them out, yet there is no value, and yet they are making losses. And I can tell you, Mama Mboga or Boda Boda somewhere from where I come, they have never seen an aeroplane. They only see landing near Eldoret. And they are paying for something that does not give value for them. And I'm not saying Kenya Airways is not important. It is, but we must look at the possibility of restructuring or coming up with viable solutions. I'm using it as an example because it's more alive to even media on what is happening and other organizations. So looking at them, cities, that the challenge is ensuring that the 10 shilling you give government, there is value for it. And you saw the president in Jandarua, in conclusion, so that you come in, he said he believes in an accountable government. So my challenge to Kenyans, pay tax. Then we take the president into account.
Okay. Senator, I'm curious, even as this is being looked at, because we cannot run away from the political skew that all of this has.
Correct.
Okay?
Yes.
There is I wouldn't expect that anybody who's aligned to the Kenya Kwanza government would oppose this. I can't.
But there are colleagues who have opposed.
Yeah, well, sure. There are colleagues who've opposed certain parts of it,
yes,
for sure.
Yes.
And the understanding from many Kenyans is that they get it. That those who've opposed it understand what Kenyans are saying. And so for Kenyans, it's not a political thing. It's a survival thing. So for Kenyans who today already have an issue, and this is where now we're saying, how we look at this side. For Kenyans who are living in the trenches today, for whom life is already very difficult, who maybe are not even in the tax brackets.
Correct.
But who will buy this fuel that go from 8 to 16? Or even if they don't buy the fuel and put in a car, they will get on a matatu. They will get on a bus.
Yes.
they will purchase goods.
Correct.
They will purchase power. And they will get less power for the shilling.
Agreed.
Because things are going to go up. We cannot run away from that reality. The question is, where do they lie in this equation? And even as you think about that answer, Senator, where on this planet has there ever been taxation towards efficient development?
I knew you were coming there. I don't know why. But those are brilliant. I think that's the honest conversation. And that is why we must tax the rich more and tax less the poor. Even when you go to established democracies like America, I know they have also debt crisis with the Chinese. The aspect is that the issue is that we tax me, city, and you more to provide for those Kenyans. One, they live in shanties. Two, they don't have 3 square meal. 3, they have, and I know a number of Kenyans who work all the way from Kibra through Langata Road trying to get to industrial area to get something to do. And most of the occasions they don't get, just the way we're happening in the villages. So I know that is why you might be talking about tax bracket, but this rising of goods, for example, like when you increase VAT from 8% to 16% of fuel, it will also affect us farmers because we use diesel. And Kenyans also who use koroboi or I don't know how do you call them, these when you are growing kerosene lamps. And
in my community we call them, I am suffocating with laughter.
Why?
If you laugh loudly, it goes off immediately.
So, that's a story. I think that should be a proverb. So I agree with you that most of these Kenyans, which we imagine are not within the tax bracket, but they are affected by this taxation. But the point is, the same people you are talking about is that we must get the levy fund, because there is what we go. You know this Langata Ring Road that links between Langata Road and Ngong Road. When you drive there and you see Kibra and see how those people are living, when you go to Mukuru Kwanjenga, some of us campaign through the city. Are you happy that you are living in Karen or Phenom Estate or anywhere, but when you are passing, your fellow Kenyans do not have sanitation, do not have clean water, do not have a house? Now it's very cold. Because if we don't get them proper housing, those people will get sick. They will strain Kenyatta National Hospital and Public Hospital for getting drugs. So I agree with you that, but the point is, how should we get these more Kenyans? One, value for the service that we are paying taxation for, number one. Number two, how do we ensure they are within the tax bracket? Because we want to increase the tax base, and that is why we are going for content creators to also pay tax. And it is not optional because YouTube pays them. Where YouTube is domiciled, Facebook and Twitter have been there. They pay tax to the government.
Okay, there's some. I think this balloons into a bigger conversation in terms of then creativity of how this can actually happen. Even going after Generation Z folks who are trying to make sure that they create content that people can benefit from, or in one way or another, even them will go for them. And there seems to be alternate solutions to this. Why I mention the alternate solution is that is it the best way? And that question that I've asked, is it the way towards development? This taxation that we are seeing here, what happens the next time? Are we going to go higher than that? Will we go even higher than that still if it doesn't work? Because the truth of the matter, like you said, even these new taxes that you want to into, or the they're not new taxes, they're an increment on taxes that already exist. You've already admitted that even that is not sufficient. It's not enough. So where are you going to go next? What about plugging the holes in corruption? We already know how much is missing, or how much goes missing that is unexplained for. Can the same zeal and fervor that is being used to tax Kenyans to within an inch of their lives be used to plug up the holes that have been created by corruption?
Thank you very much for that question. Is that you just a few minutes ago before we went for break, you said we need to expand the tax base. I know it sounds new because this is not a traditional taxation that we are used to. where I come to your shop, give you a permit, have a ETR receipt, and you're paying VAT. You have to note that the country or the world is moving to a different way of doing business, and like digital content creators, the YouTube, the Facebook, even where they are domiciled, they pay a lot of taxes to their country. And therefore we are saying these digital content creators at certain level where you have viewership on YouTube and you can do ads, there is a way you earn. And therefore, I don't think there is a problem if we tax these digital content creators. And you remember there was a time that KRA was following our Instagram pictures. Say that when you are in Santorini, we need to check somewhere exclusive and exotic for holiday, Santorini somewhere. We need to know where you are getting the money. If you are driving, for example, Range Rover Vogue of 2023 or LC 300, where do you get the fund? So the main point is that these people are digital content creators. Some people might think they are tax evaders or they do business, but it is paying. And that is why government is now going for new areas of taxation. In fact, I am looking to a possibility. You remember the Twitter verification blue? Kenyans were paying to get that blue mark. In fact, even myself and others who are able to, I'm not saying everybody was able to, but that is in form where we pay the money to, they must pay tax to that country. And therefore we are saying, okay, these young people, the Generation Z as you call it, they are doing something which is good. They keep us entertained online. In fact, most of the things have gone online nowadays. The ads have even been done online. When I will post that I have been given Assist Premium tiers, it will somebody, you don't need to go traditional listen to the radio, or of course radio will outweigh many other things, but that online marketing will give opportunity to, there are people making money, but we must increase the base that you're doing. On the issue of corruption, I agree. And you remember there was a time the former US ambassador said that corruption in Kenya is budgeted, and he was approximating around 700 plus billion that was being used to do corruption. And we have seen in this instance where the government officials put money somewhere, then they follow that money to where it is. But looking at the commitment of the president, you saw the KEMSA issue when the World Fund, is it Global Fund, sorry. Although I've looked at the history, I'm told we have been having a problems of corruption in KEMSA from 2 or 3. You have seen he has gone in, mop up and clean the KEMSA by ensuring procurement guys go, the CEO being suspended, the chair, although I believe the chair was just a few months old, to be fair. But I think the Mr. Irungu Nyakera, the new chairperson of KEMSA, will try and fix the mess. So there is already a goodwill by the president, and I can confirm to the nation, because we have told you pay tax. From the president where he sits, however mighty or high or close you are with the president, the president will deal with corruption, and he has promised, and he didn't say 90 days, he didn't say 6 months. You had an interview with him through your colleague Eric Latu. He said on this issue of Global Fund and KEMSA, I'm going to address it and fix it. Less than 24 hours, there was some changes, and I can confirm to you that most of these people who are working with government, they have been told that there is no room for corruption or laxity, because Kenyans pay painfully, have you said, tax. Yeah. It is also painful for a leader like me, my people to pay tax. Then that tax does not work for them because of corruption. And by the way, the president has shown goodwill. So let me confirm to Kenyans, because we have sat with the president a number of times, that anybody within government, however close or mighty you are, and you are caught up with corruption, the president has confirmed, even in our parliamentary group, he will be mercilessly dealing with you as an individual. And he has confirmed to the independent like EACC, DCI, he will never call any of those organizations that are tasked to fight corruption for any favor for anybody. And that is why the goodwill was just done through the KEMSA issue. So on the aspect of corruption, I can confirm to the country that the president does not have room for mercy. Mercy will only belong to the people who are receiving salvation, who want to go to heaven. But when it comes to corruption, he will deal with it firmly. And I know you have so many questions, that there are many. But we also allow the issue of the processes of investigation, the issue of litigation process, because the fact that the president, somebody say, why don't you sack them? The Employment Act is very stringent. You cannot just sack somebody. There are processes that you go through, and City is our senior here. He knows that before you fire somebody, there are processes that you under. Even in your organization like this, if you face disciplinary action, you just start. So some people say, why did the president not fire them? Those people go to court, and that is the option that the law has provided under Economics and Crimes Act of 2003 and revised after 2010, is that there is aspect of suspending. And in fact, you remember we wanted to amend the EACC Act to ensure that corruption cases are dealt within 2 years. And I was the chair of JLAC. I still believe, and I hope before the session of this year, hence I might, I'm looking at bringing those proposals so that we can amend. Because sometimes you had somebody has been arrested for corruption, 5 years, 6 years down the line, they are in court, they are acquitted, because either the witnesses are dead, the
or
evidence
like most recently, there is lack of evidence. How many cases have we seen drop since December?
Yes,
for lack of evidence.
You know
what kind of confidence does that put in a system whereby you are now saying that corruption will be dealt with, and the majority of these cases have been corruption cases where money has either gone missing or there's a likelihood of fraud. But what have we seen is that the cases have been dropped.
And I agree with you.
Against what you're saying now, that corruption will be taken seriously.
My sister, the reason I'm always becoming a DJ. The reason the reason you see some of these cases were being dropped. As a lawyer, I'll tell you, some of those cases were politically motivated, because in instances where those cases are provided hard proof, and where there is evidence. And that is why you saw my tweet the other day when they arrested Yesu wa Tongaren. Oh, it's far from us, it's the other side of Bungoma. I tweeted and I said, this aspect of using national emotions to do arrests, like Kamata Fridays, without police doing proper investigations and building a prima facie case, will always bring the end results where you go to court with a skeleton case. It does not mean the legal threshold. It is being thrown out. So the aspect, and that one does not also absolve the prosecutors. We expect the DPP, for example, Nurdin Aji, to ensure they are also thorough before taking somebody to court, because when you're taking somebody to court, and economic crimes anywhere across the world is not easy to investigate.
So then how can
because
you convince
when you're looking for a voucher? Sure,
I hear what you're saying, but then that it could have happened in the last administration. It can happen in this administration. No. How are you going to convince Kenyan senator today that we're saying, okay, you guys, you pay this tax, okay? We're sealing up the holes of corruption to make sure that no money goes missing. We've seen cases being dropped because they were politically instigated and motivated, but we're saying none of that is going to happen in this administration. How are you going to convince folks of that when we're seeing this happening here?
But my sister, the issue is that there is already political goodwill, and I'm using KEMSA for example, because there is the part that the president can do, for example, is, for example, sacking and ensuring that cleaning up the system. There is a role of EACC, DCI, there is a role of courts.
Sacking doesn't clean up the system.
But of course, but I can confirm to you, if those people are found to have committed any economic crime and corruption,
cleaning up the system,
the EACC and DCI will take up it from there.
I agree, but cleaning up the system would make a lot more sense if we applied some of the tenets of Chapter 6, where people who are mentioned, you step aside, not sacked, because something seems to be wrong and your presence may interfere with the process of investigation that you've mentioned. You see, I understand the position that someone like you finds themselves in. I understand. I understand because you are part of the party that is now in power, and you inherited 1,001 things that you're finding you need to grapple with to make sense and to provide whatever it is you promised Kenyans. I understand all that. But I also understand that the situation we are in requires less words and more actions.
Correct.
So when you talk about what the president has said, it is a good precedence. But it has to be supported by more action, because if you're talking about cases of impropriety in this country, there are many. There are very, very, very many. And there are many that are in the making, simply because of the thinking of the people who hold positions of authority in this country. People want to make money. And usually it's at the expense of the citizen
Correct.
whom they're supposed to serve. Now, when we talk about what needs to be done and what is being done, don't you think that the citizens would perhaps pander more towards the president and the presidency if they saw KEMSA good, if they witnessed the very things that they consider germane to them being acted on? They saw. Right now, we are dominating our conversation with the taxes. There is no way taxes are a pleasant conversation. It does not matter what one says. No one wants to hear about taxes. But the actions would make it palatable because you feel, we can see. My question, what do you think Kenya Kwanza is going to do to ensure that the things they have said, of the many things they have said, what are they going to prioritize to show Kenyans that they actually, their lives are changing? Not tell them, they've told us. What can we see that will guarantee that lives are changing for the better?
I agree entirely with what you're saying. Because at the end of the day, I agree. The aspect, the fact that Kenyans are paying tax, we need to see tax works, and I've said that before. Because you don't need to pay tax, and then when you get out there, the roads are not there, the service is not there, the public transport is not fixed. You need to pay tax to get value for that taxation. And one of the ways to ensure we address corruption, and that is why from the onset I say the president has shown goodwill by even starting with KEMSA. I know there is issue like sports fund, and you saw I had a motion on the floor of the House where sports fund has been misappropriated, where sports are being run through Harambes. You have seen our sportsmen and women getting stranded in hotel in fields, and you are told Kenyans for Kenyans, there is a pay bill. And yet there is a sports fund that has been dedicated to fund sports and growth talents.
Which receives money.
Which receives money.
Yes.
And the sports act has put. So I know there is corruption there. There are people who are misusing that money, moving to fuel subsidy at that point, moving for campaigns during the previous, during the campaign period. There is also the KQ where somebody is a CEO sits. He knows he can make losses, but being paid through bailout, So, there are different aspects of corruptions. Corruption is where I'm in an office, preside over an organization that makes losses, and then I use taxpayer to bail out. That's also corruption. That's the definition of another corruption. So I agree with you. There are 1,001 corruption allegations that were there. But I can confirm, and the president has said, and if you watch keenly, he has confirmed that in his administration, he will ensure that the independent institutions do their job and are well resourced. Then he will ensure, and that is why he has undertaken, when they were in retreat in Mount Kenya Safari Club, that anybody who, even if it is his friends or how close you are and the mighty you are, he will not become a refuge, or he will not allow anybody mention on the issue of corruption or allegations of it. The aspect you have mentioned about chapter 6, and this is a conversation, because now, before a proof of either conviction under the law, and we accuse you, City Muga, that we just mentioned you over something, I don't think will be fair. Because if you are applying for a government job, and somebody mentioned you somewhere that you took a loan, you didn't pay back your loan.
It's my job to prove that I actually paid.
For example, you come, but we cannot use the mentions that somebody has unless we have a proof. For example, if we accuse you of an impropriety, you should be taken to court. If you are convicted, well and good, then you don't qualify to get a job. But if you are acquitted, then how can we deny you a job?
You're a lawyer, Mheshimiwa. I'm going to take you to something a little more interesting,
Yes.
like the Rome Statute, okay?
Yes.
Where the burden of proof, or the statute that puts the limit on what the burden is the threshold is high.
Yes.
When people are accused and you say you are party to some wrongdoing, one of the things that they require you to do is to show how it is you pushed back if you are in a position where you were ordered to do something and you participate in a wrong.
Yes.
They expect you to show evidence that you pushed back on that particular order.
Yes.
But simply saying you are ordered is inadequate.
Correct.
Now, why am I giving that as an example? People like yourself, learned friends who understand the law, understand these things that we're saying even better. The reason why impropriety has to be something that people avoid is when you know there are consequences for even being mentioned. But so long as even when you're mentioned and the matter goes to court and you're still gung-ho about it and it's like nothing will happen, then we are killing the whole idea of accountability.
And ethics.
Yes, completely. So it stops making sense.
But you know, under Chapter 6, and we have a law that has been passed, it is a dicey situation. Because where I believe, if you are to not to hire anybody who has been mentioned, almost 40 million plus Kenyans would not be hired. Because in one way or another,
somebody has been mentioned.
Somebody has been mentioned.
Okay. Even as we're coming to the top of this, Senator, then we've seen the reshuffle of PSs.
Yes.
We've seen essentially the people who run ministries.
Yes. They are the accounting officers.
Accounting officers. So are we seeing that as a sound bell from the president that's mirroring or reflecting what you're saying, that it's not business as usual anymore? With these 7 PSs, there more to come. What does this mean?
You know, people who have engaged and stayed with President William Ruto knows is biased towards ensuring performance. And I advise these people, and I came on this show, that if you want to work under President William Ruto's government, and specifically President William Ruto, you must have picked the plan and the manifesto, studied it properly, understand how it works. I remember when the CBC presented their report in State House, within 10 to 20 minutes the president released them because he believed they had not performed very well. Even in Mount Kenya Safari Club, on some PSS tried to present. Even when we were in parliamentary group, some PSS came when we were in Naivasha and they were stopped on their tracks because they were not presenting a realistic. So these individuals should study the manifesto and the plan of the president and know how President William works. There is no room for complacency. The underlying factor is performance. And I can say you, going into the future, there are more heads that keep rolling to the highest level of CSS. Because now we are getting into real work. The fact that we are requesting Kenyans, are not saying we are pushing Kenyans to pay taxes, is those Kenyans will want the service to be top-notch. So the changes and heads that will keep rolling will go as high as CSS, not
But
only
remember,
PSS.
Once something becomes law, it's no longer suggestion.
You don't have a choice, do you?
It's not as though you're being told.
But
You know, a good doctor will not tell you
not
are
force you to
dying.
take
He
the
will tell you
medicine.
we are managing, saying some drugs and what have you. What I'm just saying, because you have asked a very important question, is that they will keep be changes. We are trying to. The president is trying to clean up system and get the people who believe in his. And more than 7 months, approved some of the PSS and CSS that they have the capacity to run. And also, you have to know,
So you're saying
we
the
are still
president
also
is committed to rooting out corruption and ensuring
efficiency.
that the monies that we pay as citizens of Kenya
Our value.
do the work that it is intended for.
I guess
Amen.
that's the nugget that we're going away
and that
with
is why
today.
I'm saying the fact that the president heads will keep ruling even to the highest, and even head of departments in serious organization, and therefore even we are still also cleaning up the government of Azimio remnants, so that we have the correct people in those positions.
Senator SAMSON, CHERARGEI, and Senator Nandi County, thank you for joining us this morning. The conversation continues, whether we like it or not. Thanks for
Absolutely.
being with us today, and again, soon.